Hello everyone and welcome to Smart Coach. Today in this class we are going to talk about the growth of nationalism in India. We will be studying about the nationalistic phase that India went into and the coming of Congress, but we have to understand how did nationalism grew in India, and before Congress was formed, how did political associations were established across India, and when Congress was formed, it became the umbrella party to bring all these political personalities or leaders into one place or under one umbrella party. So, before we discuss the growth of Congress or formation of Indian National Congress, we need to know why did nationalism grow in India. So, today's topic is growth of nationalism or growth of nationalism, which is also known as national consciousness. And along with that, we will also study formation of first political associations. That's a long heading, I would say, and it took me 1 minute to finish writing it. But let's start with the discussion of growth of nationalism. Now, when we talk about nationalism, there were many factors which led to the growth of nationalism. Let's write them in point. The first factor which led to the growth of nationalism was obviously the national awakening that took place in the form of Renaissance, which is also known as Bengal Renaissance. We can name it Bengal Renaissance or National Renaissance that happened. So, what is Renaissance? If you have studied world history, you will know that in 15th century, Europe underwent Renaissance, which means rebirth. And what is rebirth? The rebirth in Europe took place, it was the rebirth of interest in Latin, in Greek and Roman literature. Similarly, in India, a Renaissance took place, a renewed interest in learning Vedas, in learning our ancient scriptures, as well as learning new modern philosophies and theories. This was the Renaissance that came into India with the coming of the Westerners, and this influenced many Indians who thought that India needed to change. Remember, in 18th century, when Britain or British East India Company came to India, India was not only divided into many political units, but it was also divided into caste, creed and religion. It was divided as a society, and these intellectuals who studied, who tried to learn about Indian history, who tried to learn about the Western culture as well, realized that India needs to get united. India was not a nation per se at that time, and India needs to come together to form a united whole, a nation which could fight for its growth. So, this Renaissance, and if you suggest, there were main important leaders associated with this Renaissance. Ram Mohan Roy and his Brahmo Samaj is one of the important personality and important organization which was associated with this Renaissance, because he questioned the superstition and idol worship in Indian society. Ram Mohan Roy wrote many books, and in that he not only questioned Indian society, but he also questioned Christianity, the current Christian form that was there, and he said that we should study Vedas, and Vedas give us proper knowledge of life. So, he was trying to revisit Vedas, trying to bring the information of Vedas. At the same time, he said that Indian society should do away with superstition. Then there was Dayanand Saraswati. Then we have Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. So all these people, they worked for the constructive growth of Indian society. They formed organizations, they opened educational institutions, they worked for emancipation of women and emancipation of poor people. And what happened, these organizations that they formed, they became the harbinger of national movement. For the first time, the organization like Brahmo Samaj of Raja Ram Mohan Roy or Dayanand Saraswati's Arya Samaj, it brought people together and it taught people how people together can work for a cause. Okay, so what happened, these organizations, you can further write in your answers, organizations formed by them, what did this organization do? They gave the first knowledge, the first hand information how to come together as group and work for nation building and work for cause. So this is a very important reason why National Renaissance can be tagged as the first point in this discussion. The second reason or the cause was obviously the centralized, over-centralized administration of British administration or Britain. Over-centralized administration of East India Company. First it was East India Company and then the British government. Now remember, till 1857, Governor General's Council didn't even had Indian member in that council. It was only in 1909 that when the British administration decided that Viceroy's Council will have at least one Indian member. So the whole administration was very much centralized. After the revolt of 1857, the whole administration went into the hand of Crown. Crown became the true ruler of or the British government started administrating India, and all the administrative policies were taken up in Britain, in the Parliament of Britain, and hardly there was any representation, an Indian representation in the Parliament. As such, whatever decision were made, it was not made in tune with the Indian aspiration or desire. It was so much centralized that people in India had no say in administration. As such, what happened? This centralized administration did two things. First of all, it united India. So what had happened? It united India under single administrative head. Administrative head. And next, what had happened? Because this administrative head was exploitative, it gave a common cause to all. Remember, before British came or East India Company came, India itself was divided into many princely states or fragmented political units. Now, this continued even till the time of independence, when there was princely states and principalities coexisting, side by side. There were British administrative units like the provinces, and then there were princely states. Now, because of this fragmented structure, many Indians never felt the need to fight for united nation, but wherever British government went, they came up with uniform civil code, they came up with uniform taxation system. As such, irrespective of caste, creed or religion, people were under same administration and they saw the same entity or political entity as their villain. This brought India together and the national feeling traveling in Indians grew because of this. The third important cause for the growth of nationalism was Western education. Now, if you remember, by 1813, Charter Act of 1813, it was made clear to East India Company that they had to spend at least 1 lakh rupees for the growth of Western scientific rational education. Why? Because by 1813, East India Company was in a position where it could administer a large part of India. It had annexed lot of land in India, and it needed people, skillful people to work as administrators, but not as administrators, but at least in the clerical position. So, for that they needed Indians who were educated in English, who knew scientific and mathematical laws, and Western education was imparted to them. In 1833, East India Company and the Governor General of India, Lord Bentinck, took the decision that the money of government will be spent on spreading Western education and educating Indians on the Western style. So, what happened after that? Western education became part and parcel of Indian people who wanted job in government. So, because of that, two things happened. Britishers got loyal class of Indians who became westernized in a way, because they started imitating Western culture. They thought that Western culture was the best culture that they could imbibe. And second, Britishers got cheap skilled labor in India as clerical laborers, as clerks, and as as in menial administrative posts. But this also opened the gateway of education for Indians. Now, Indians were not only studying philosophy of India, but now they came to know about French Revolution, about American Revolution, about Renaissance, about the ideas of Locke and Hobbes, who were talking about democracy and people's right, liberty, fraternity. This Western education became the foundation on which the intellectual class of India grew, and they decided to bring change in India. So, Western education actually led to the growth of educated Indian class. Educated Indian class who knew that India had to change. India could not recede back to the dark age of monarchy, but it had to move forward to democracy, to republicanism, to a society where common will of people will be respected. So, Western education was one of the cause. The fourth cause was growth in the means of communication. Growth of the means of communication. By 1850, under Curzon's, during Curzon's rule, that is Governor General Lord Curzon's rule, many revolutionary techniques were adopted, or the communication, means of communication in India was revolutionized. Remember, by 1850, India got railways, telegraph, and obviously the postal system was also upgraded. Now, due to this, the people now easily connected with each other. These people of India who earlier did not travel out of their village were now traveling from Kanyakumari to Jammu Kashmir. They also learned about the length and breadth of their own country, and this brought people together. Now, problems were not concentrated to a small section of society. If people revolted in Bengal, this news soon spread to west in Gujarat, because the people were travelling through railways. And even in railways, if you remember Gandhi, who was in South Africa, and he was not allowed to board first class coach. These kind of treatment which was meted to Indians even when these communication system was introduced actually resulted in the growth of nationalism. Railways, for that matter, became a very important tool in growth of nationalism, because newspaper which were published in one corner of country were had to travel from one place to other through railways, and there were many laws which were brought in future where the newspaper were barred from using railway, and transportation of newspaper was stopped because magistrate had to check what was published in press. So railways became an important tool for the growth of nationalism, but this nationalism also developed because when people boarded the train, irrespective of their caste, creed or religion, they sat in the same compartment, they discussed about their trouble, and they realized that whole India was under the dominance of one administrative structure, and the problem was with that single administrative structure. As such, nationalism grew, the sense of being equal grew, the sense that everybody is unitedly affected by the British government grew, which led to the growth of fraternity, which is one of the pillar of nationalism. Now, when I am talking about means of communication, I must mention here obviously the role played by press. Now, if you remember, it was in 1780 that first newspaper was published in Bengal, and the name of the newspaper was Bengal Gazette. With this, a new revolutionary era began, because these newspapers were highly critical about the policies of the government, and where it was seen that government was prejudiced towards British citizens and they were not giving due interest or attention to the demands of the Indian. Such policies were severely criticized, obviously, which resulted in many licensing acts. So, if you see from 1860 onwards, we see the growth of licensing acts. This is the same year when vernacular newspapers also started getting published. Now, Bengali language newspapers became very famous. One of the famous newspaper in Bengali language at that time was Amrit Bazar Patrika, and it severely criticized the policies of the Governor General and Viceroy. Now, what happened because of this? There were many laws which were passed to curb the independence of newspaper or the freedom of newspaper, and one of those laws, if you remember, was Vernacular Press Act. Now, if I have to mention date, many people forget the dates of such important act. So, remember, press or first newspaper was published in 1780. It is the same date. If you just crisscross the date, write 1878. See, the date is not that difficult to remember. 1780 was the date when the first newspaper was published, that is Bengal Gazette, and Vernacular Press Act came in 1878. Just take the middle number. So, 1878 Vernacular Press Act was passed to curb the freedom of vernacular newspapers, which were spreading lot of information regarding government policy and openly criticizing them. So, press became a very important tool to spread nationalism, because they not only highlighted what was wrong with the policy of the government, but they also made people aware about their own political rights. And next important point that I must mention here was the economic exploitation of India. Now, by the time we came to in 1857, the revolt that took place was in itself evident that India was economically starving, and after 1857, the political consciousness that grew was built on economic nationalism. Writers or national leaders like Dadabhai Naroji, they came up with the concept of drain of wealth, and people became very aware that unlike other rulers like Mughals or for that matter Delhi Sultanate, British administration was very different. They were alien administration because whatever they earned in India, they did not spend it in India. They took the money back at home, and the money that they earned in India was supporting the economy of mother country. In our case, the mother country was obviously Britain. So, this economic exploitation became more visible during the time of World War I and World War II, and that also led to the growth of nationalism. And even if you see, after 1857, there were major groups who were seeing the darker side of the society, like Muslims. After 1857, Muslims were put away from elitist jobs. They were not given jobs in higher post of administration, because at that time British government thought that it was because of Muslim participation that revolt of 1857 was successful. So, what you see is a major growth in poverty, major growth in illiteracy and unemployment, because agriculture had been destroyed, handloom industry was destroyed. So, there was hardly any avenue left for a youth of India as far as employment was concerned, other than taking up government job, and for government job he had to be English educated. So, this was result of economic exploitation which led to the growth of national consciousness. The last important factor that I must mention here is the historical research which took place during this time. Now, if you have studied ancient India, which I am sure you must have studied, you will see that most of the research were taking place during 1850s. For that matter, Harappan sites were first studied, not studied, but something was written on Harappan site as early as 1850s. A traveller, Charles Merson, who was travelling in Montgomery district of Pakistan, came across the Indus Valley sites. After that, a regular study took place on this site. Not only that, by first half of 19th century, Ashokan script were deciphered, Buddhism was also being studied, Sanskrit and Persian texts were being translated, like under the reign of Warren Hastings. The Sanskrit books were translated during that time, Hitopdesh was translated, Gita was translated, Persian books and books written during the reign of Aurangzeb was translated. All these showcase the rich heritage of India, and people again regained confidence in their culture, in their history, which resulted in the growth of nationalism, as people believe that India once was a glorious nation and it could re-attain that height with proper government interference. So, these were the cause for growth of nationalism. Now, let us talk about the associations or the early associations which were formed. Now, when we talk about the earliest association, one of the first person to come up with such a political association was Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Now, the association's name was Bang Bhasha Prakashika Sabha. And this association was formed by, let me write the name, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, in the year 1836. In the same year, now this is considered as a political association because Raja Ram Mohan Roy was the first person who took up the case of the peasants. He suggested that Indians should have more representation in administration, and the royals should not suffer in the hand of Zamindar. He questioned the Zamindari system which was in place at that time in Bengal. So, that is why this association is considered as one of the first political association. But remember, in the same year, just look at the year 1836, in the same year another association came up in Bengal, that is known as Zamindar Association. And it also came up in 1836, and one of the founder of this association was Dwarakanath Tagore. Now, before 1857, many such associations came. This Zamindar's association was actually not a political association, it was basically a power group which decided to bring the problems of Zamindars in notice of the Governor General of Bengal, or at least to the Indian government. Now, similarly, another association came up which was known as British India Society. In 1843, and it was it was founded by William Adam, which was more general in nature, because it not only talked about Zamindars, the problem of Zamindars, but it was also trying to highlight the problem of peasants and riots. Soon, these two associations, Zamindar Association and British India Association, will form one association, will come together and merge, and it will form one association which will be known as British India Association in 1851. So, the next association which will be formed with taking these two associations together will be known as British India Association, and it will be formed in 1851. So, these are few associations which were formed before 1857, that is revolt of 1857. After revolt of 1857, we see a change in the whole attitude of Indians, because remember by 1855 All India Civil Service exam had started in London, and Indians were also participating, because by the Charter Act of 1853, Indians were now given the right to participate in these exams. So, they were not even only becoming aware about their political need, but they were also trying to get into administration and somehow take the administrative power in their hand. So, the political associations which came later after 1857, they were purely political in structure, and they were not talking about any power group or any certain group, but they were talking about important political change which were needed in India. Let me mention the name of the association, important association which were formed after 1857. One of the first such association was obviously East India Association. Let me write it here, East India Association, and it was formed in London by Dadabhai Naoroji, remember that, and the year was 1867, and this was formed by Dadabhai Naoroji. Now, remember similar it was formed in London, but in India right after that many associations came up, like there was Indian Association of Calcutta, which was formed by Surendranath Banerjee, and it was formed somewhere around 1876. Then there was Bombay Association, Madras Native Association, Pune Sarvajanik Sabha. All these political associations were formed after 1857, and these associations were more political in nature than the early associations which were formed in Bengal and other part of India. With this, I would end my class. I will meet you in another class with another topic.